Welcome back to another episode of the Evercast, your one-stop shop for anything related to Evermore. We are not an official part of Evermore. We're just a group of super nerd fans of Evermore, and we just want to get the word out. I'm Kazan.
I'm Pitt.
Hi, I'm Robin.
And that's Sly.
And that's Sly. And joining for the first time is Audrey.
Hi, I'm Audrey Henriksen. Let's see. I've been world walking since first lore, so lore 2018. It's been a while.
What guild are you in?
Funny story. It took me 2 years to officially join a guild, but I did finally join the Knights.
Nice. Good for them. And before we start, we'd like to recognize our new council members on the Everguard. We've got Mischief and Jim have been voted in. We're excited to see their work on the council. We'd also like to give a shout out to Derek Tucker. He's our spotlight for the week. He's a level 6 ranger working on his Archon rank. He's a great archer and he's a great code breaker. And get to know him in Park or get to know him on Facebook, and you'll see our spotlight on the Everguard page.
Thank you for joining us today. We will be doing a Lore 2020 season recap. So buckle up. We've got a lot to talk about today. So first of all, let's start with where we ended during Pyra 2020.
That was quite a whirlwind of the closing night of Pyra. It was so much fun with the end of the epics where the Commodore opened the ley leaks, making it very dangerous for anybody to be, if anybody inhaled the ley, they would die. So we came together as a town, as guilds, and we decided to push Evermore out into the endless sea. And that was, if you were there for closing night, that was an amazing time. Each guild had a part.
I really liked that, actually, that everyone, especially high-ranking members of guilds were given like special tasks. The bards, especially, being able to give those speeches.
Yes, those speeches were really fun.
So cool.
And it was amazing seeing all the knights lined up, beating their shields with swords. That was really, really amazing to hear that sound effect.
It was really fun to be on the front line of that.
And meanwhile, the Rangers were having fighting. No big.
What were the Rangers doing?
Sneaking.
Yeah, they were fighting. That was when Driner found out that Vela had changed the mission. So after the Rangers were given their assignments and all the things were done, they had a conversation. It was great. It was grand. Anyways, that's when he found out, and it was him yelling at her just saying that's how it is. So it was a lot of fun.
Great. For those who are new listeners, I wanted to just clarify that the Endless Sea is kind of like space, and all the different realms are in the Endless Sea. So now Evermore is no longer located in England. It is tethered to the earth magically, but is floating in the Endless Sea. So if you imagine it kind of floating in space, that's the storyline.
They described it as a jar of marbles, each marble representing a realm, like Earth would be a marble and Lore would be a marble, and the space in between the marbles, this interdimensional void, is the in-between, or endless seas.
And I believe the realms include like the planet as well as the stars around it. So
Okay.
Wonderful.
So Saturn is on Earth's realm.
Is there anything?
ours. No one else can have it.
All right. Let's move into Lore 2020. The first day that Lore opened, we arrived in town and there were circus tents pitched in the center of town, and the local townsfolk did not know where they had come from or who was behind them. Tell me, everybody, a little bit about your first impressions of our Spectre Fair. That was the theme for Lore 2020.
Really cool vibe. I liked, they're just kind of this creepy, demonic circus. A lot of interesting characters, very diverse characters and races. Very interesting. I liked it.
Let's go into the races maybe a little bit. If everyone could talk about a race and maybe describe just in a couple sentences what we knew about them.
I'll take the Zavros because I offered to become one. We had a few vampires. They're vampires. And we've had vampires in Evermore before in the catacombs, But it turns out that those are very ancient vampires, and they start to look a certain way after thousands of years. I think Aazreaal, who, fun fact, has been around Evermore since lore 2018, one of only 3 characters, I believe, who was still in the park lore 2020. The other 2 being Suraran and Alice. Am I missing anyone? Just those 3. Anyway, Aazreaal, he's 5,200 years old or something like that. And if you want to know more about him, there's a YouTube channel, Aazreaal the Vampire, where you hear some music that gives a little more insight into his psyche. So, but anyway, the circus brought with them a few vampires that looked like humans because they're younger vampires, and they're known as Blight Veins or Malura. We had Goose, we had Eddie, and we had Kieran. And we learned that they drink blood, obviously, but they originally were humans who had their blood replaced with vampire blood, if I understand correctly.
Mhm.
And if a vampire turns another human into a vampire, they are controlled and have to obey their commands.
That was very interesting.
They have red eyes. They have to eat at least once a month, it sounds like, or they start to go kind of berserk.
Hmm.
Those vampires were part of there was like a whole story that I didn't really get into, but they're a cursed group. And because of their curse, when they fed, they had to kill.
Yeah.
It was no half measures. You could kill somebody who was 3 times bigger than you, and it would still just be 1 kill, 1 feeding. Or you could kill someone half your size, and it didn't matter. It wasn't the quantity, it was just the kill.
And I think we
Yeah,
got really
and-
into that because of what we'll talk about in a minute about circularity. We're trying to think of creative ways to feed vampires without killing.
And I can go a little bit deeper into the lore of Dayloth later on about why they're cursed like that.
Okay.
One of my favorite races we had this season were the Ataman, and those were demons. They often had little horns somewhere on their face, and they eat souls. And it was really interesting how they would describe eating those souls. And my favorite Atamans were, is that plural? My favorite Ataman were Nicodemus, who was the showmaster, the ringmaster of the circus, and Xantippe, his circus producer. They both were fabulous characters, and they could smell fear. So they'd go around, well, primarily Nicodemus would go around smelling people, and he'd growl and snarl and, talk about wanting to eat your fear and really trying to convince people that they should face their fear. But the risk was if you faced your fear and were not successful in overcoming it, then you would become a clown. And we'll get into that in a minute. But the Ataman actors were fabulous. I loved the makeup and the costuming and just the way the actors portrayed them. They were very, very convincing.
You'd be minding your own business, and all of a sudden you'd hear sniffing behind you.
Yeah, and he was really intimidating. Like his body language, he'd get really into your personal space, and the sniffing and snarling, you could almost not hear. Like it was just part of who he was. And it was very, very awesome.
The best race that was introduced were the humans from Dayloft, the Hallowguard and everything that came in with them, their lore, all of their different personalities. I won't name names, but one that is very mischievous, and I love it. Yeah, those were the best. Unfortunately, we got to keep them, or at least it looked like it. Maybe not.
They
But
did
the
stay,
humans.
yeah.
They did? Okay.
Great. All right, who wants to talk about the Morning?
Yeah, the Mornin they're known as like the hags back on Dayloth, but often they like to present themselves as very beautiful kind of a thing. There are males and females, but the females actually live a lot longer than the males do. They primarily feed on bones. So bones of a sapient being, so like human bones. I believe Svetlana said that she preferred more fresh, use that word, fresh bones. But I believe they could feed on any type of human bones, no matter how old they were, at least from what I could understand. The other Morin we had was Petra. Fun fact, apparently the Morin, if we saw Svetlana with her nails, her claws, apparently all of them have that. Petra just likes to cut hers off. So
Thank you. Who would like to talk about the Tampier?
Well, I don't think we know much about the rest of these. We didn't see any of these others, right? The Tampier, the who are like gargoyles that eat keratin
yeah,
type things. The Metamoshi, who steal skin and limbs.
Those ones sounded really horrific.
yeah.
That does sound horrific.
Capier, who are like jackals and eat organs, and then the Cirasta, who steal youth.
So that
Well,
may be foreshadowing
children.
for another season, maybe lore 2021. We might see those.
And these were all houses, or I guess races, of the realm Dayloth, which we had never. I guess Mr. Smibs is from Dayloth, but we didn't know much about Dayloth until this season. Audrey, did you want to tell us like what it's like there and kind of the lore behind Dayloth?
Sure. So back on Dayloth, it is really close, I believe, to their planet's sun. And so the surface is pretty molten, pretty much you go up there, you burn to death kind of thing really quickly. So all of the races live underground. There is a large underground area. I'm not sure how big, but it's really big. It's called the Hollow. It's where all the races live. The humans live on, I believe it's either the middle or top level, where the races live on the bottom level. And so they kind of met each other when they were both tunneling, and then they met each other, and then that's kind of when that war started, when they started using humans as food, kind of a thing.
I didn't know that. Interesting.
Humans actually aren't native to Dayloth. Yeah, humans actually, there were a group of them, I can't remember which portal, but there are several portals on Earth, if you didn't know. But as a group went through the portal closed, and they were left on Dayloth, and so they did what humans do best and tried to survive. So that's actually how humans came to be on Dayloth.
And a lot of those races ended up breeding and running the humans as if they were cattle. That was their food source for a lot of vampires in particular. And so the humans there were not, their experience was not at all like an Earth humans experience. Family units were not really a thing, and they were really treated as cattle. They didn't really have names, so they didn't really have any identity. So that was really interesting. And
that was
Mr.
the
Smith
case.
talked about that in Pyra, the season before lore. So that was kind of interesting to see some of that history carrying over.
And that was the case for Mr. Smibs. We found out throughout the season that he, as a child, he, like Robin said, he didn't know his family, but he, at the age of 5, he was sent to one of the Zavros to be eaten. And that Zavros liked to play with his food and gave a chance for Mr. Smibs to escape. And I hear he might have flickered.
Yes.
Curus. Mr. was just what they called, he didn't have a name. So he got the name Mr. As his first name. And that's why he's terrified of all of these creatures that came in through with the fair.
And for those who are not aware and have not visited the park before, Mr. Smibs was one of the pirates in town in Evermore. And he was often in the battle arena teaching sword fighting lessons and things like that. All right, should we talk about the roles in the circus? Who would like to lead out with one of the roles?
Well, we've got the aerialists. They were each a gem, which was kind of weird. I still don't understand how, but I guess their native form was a gem, and they could transform into a human form and then back. But their personalities were very almost like, I don't know, robotic or not robotic. What am I looking for?
Programmed. They were programmed, it seems. That's the word that the circus staff used when they were describing them to me.
And each gem, this became kind of a theme throughout the whole season, is these gems held fear within them as a form of energy, which is why the circus was there in the first place, to gather our fears so that they could power their machines and use the gems as currency. And
well, and they also use fear to create the gems.
Mhm.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
different
gems
types
were-
of fear create different gems.
It seemed like the gems were a refined, concentrated form of specific fear, and that was used as currency by the Ottoman, but they also would use it as a narcotic, and so they craved it.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to have each fear represented in a gem. It kind of became it's nice to have magic that follows some kind of order with rules. And it was interesting to learn, like, well, what fear is this gem and what fear is this gem?
Mhm.
And each of the aerialists had their names were based off of their gem. So we had Sapphira, Rubin for ruby, Esmeralda for emerald.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And the siren was created from a gem as well. So it wasn't just the aerialists. The siren's core fear that she was created from was fear of open water and deep water and oceans and waves, which was really interesting that they made a siren out of it.
Yeah.
But they didn't give her a name as of the last time I was in park. They name her as a
They did eventually give her a name. I can't remember what it was, but they did eventually give her a name. A world walker suggested that she would be easier to handle if they gave her a name. And so they did, and she was easier to handle. So
Interesting.
It worked.
All right, who would like to talk about the clowns?
The clowns they were very interesting with my interactions with them. They were ones that faced their fear and then failed facing their fear. The fear overcame them. And so they basically became catatonic. And so talking with Nicodemus and talking to some of the clowns, that if they're ever faced with that fear again, they do it again. They become catatonic at the same time. So they don't know their lives before they became clowns.
That was like erased or something, right?
Yeah, just so that they didn't have to, they couldn't, so they could actually function. I talked with the oldest clown, I believe it was Pepe, and I asked him and the other clowns, like, so did you meet Pepe before? And they're like, nope, we just showed up. And it's just very interesting. And that ties into Mr. Snib's story also, why he chose certain things to do later on.
One thing that I thought was interesting talking to the clowns, I talked with Pirouette quite a bit, and she was a trapeze artist who had fallen in her previous life and broken her body quite badly, and so was afraid of heights. And it was interesting how she talked about Nicodemus as if he was like a hero rescuing her, and she got to come be part of his circus, but he would eat the fear off of them. And she described it as being like freshly drafted beer, you know how it gets that head on top that drips over the edge of the mug. She said that was the way her fear was. It was always bubbling up, and the Ottoman would just kind of skim that foam off so she could function. And if she wasn't around them, if she ever went more than like a mile or two away from the circus, then it was a state of catatonic stupor, and she couldn't do anything. And so I thought that was really interesting, that relationship that they had with the circus. Okay. Ghosts. Who wants to talk about ghosts?
We had ghosts. And we've seen ghosts in previous seasons at Evermore. Usually they have unfinished business. So we had Holly, who was an ice skater. She had fallen through the ice and died. We had Horace. Robin, did you want to talk about Horace?
I just loved Horace. I didn't get to know him super well, but his character was hilarious. He was a poltergeist, and he would move things around the park. And if you said hello or something, he would act all depressed that you could see him because he really wanted to be invisible. And he was just this mischievous ghost that would just go around doing nonsense, just moving stuff from one part of an area to the next and making himself a general nuisance, but a super depressed ghost that was really quite funny.
And he played into Maxwell's story, right, Audrey?
Yes, he did. For those of you who don't know Maxwell, just very briefly, he was a character that we didn't know was a mass murderer. Turns out he was a mass murderer, has killed a lot of people, and Horace was actually one of the ones who had been killed by Maxwell several years ago. And so his unfinished business, we think, was just knowing like why he had been killed.
I love how the Evermore writing team ties things from previous seasons all in together and plants Easter eggs all over the place. That's really quite fun as a regular attendee to see all of that tie in.
Speaking of which, and also speaking of ghosts, in the haunt, I guess let me back up a little bit. The haunt was created by the fair to be able, you know, is your typical spook alley where you walk through and you get scared. And it's a walkthrough, not meant to have a whole lot of story behind it. But at the end, you had these two ghosts. Everything in the haunt was supposed to be like a, what is it called? Construct by the fair. So not really an actual person or ghost or monster, except for the werewolf and the vampires. But it turns out the ghosts at the end were actually real ghosts as well. It was assumed they were constructs. They were related to a story that had been told since the beginning of Evermore concerning the doll of Charlie. It's this ventriloquist doll that has this horrible story where these twin girls had him as a doll, and I guess one of them died, and so the other one killed herself. I think it's actually a true story.
That's what I remember as well. We'll have to
That's what I remember also, that it's a true story that Charlie is an actual haunted doll, that they have put Charlie in his box before, and they leave for the night and they come back and Charlie is out.
Super creepy.
Yes, that out of the whole entire haunt, the burrows were the most terrifying part of the haunt for me.
Oh, we should describe the burrows. Chris, will you describe how the burrows looked?
It was, so my first experience going through the burrows, I was on a task from Kiva to figure out, since the Bards Guild was in the burrows during Pyra, and then the haunt came and Charlie kicked them out. And so she wanted me to go see if there was anything that could be to find some books or some of her music, because she was doing sonotherapy. And when we first went in there, it was right at the beginning of the season, and she's like, "Oh, we've only been out for a couple of days, but there's cobwebs everywhere. There's dolls,
so many dolls,
like creepy dolls.
Yes, dolls, creepy dolls everywhere." The makeup artists on the first two girls in that first room did amazing on them. It just puts tingles up my spine. Then you go into the center part where the Bards Guild was, and that's where the twins were saying, "Come play with us. Come, Charlie's here. Come." And it was just, oh yes, and more dolls and the lighting. And then next, right before you leave the haunt, there's a merry-go-round just playing the normal music, but it's just creepy. And then out of the far corner comes a life-size Charlie, and it's, yes,
bugged out eyes.
Yes. Oh, it was, out of all of the haunt, that was the creepiest part for me.
Yeah, me too. Very well performed. I don't know who was the actor or actress behind Charlie, but it was very well done.
Very well done. And he would always ask, "Do you want to play with me?"
Uh-huh.
And I'd always ask, "What do you want to play?" And he'd say, "I want to play with you." As if I was the doll, I guess. I don't know.
That's when you just go, nope, gotta go.
Yeah.
I just love the haunt, like embracing the fear and letting myself be scared. It's kind of cool to let yourself feel fear.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the twins, I loved how they would be sitting down and they'd both stand up at the same time. They'd be crying with their heads down, and they'd both stand up at the exact same time and look up at you. And they'd say something. What would they say?
They were looking for each other, at least the times I
Yes.
went through.
So even though they were holding hands, they couldn't see each other or talk to each other. And so I made it my quest to help them out and try and, at one point I was translating back and forth messages for each of them, because one was scared because she hadn't seen her sister and the other one hadn't seen her as well. And one of them felt guilty. Faith felt guilty for, I guess, killing her sister to let her be with her or something like that. I don't know. But it was very tragic, and I kept trying to figure out how to help them find their unfinished business and see each other. I eventually gave up because I kept hearing that they were constructs. But then on the finale night, after the fair left, I see Faith walking by herself, crying. And I'm like, what's going on? And I'd like to thank Chance for pushing me to go talk to her. Because at that point, I'd already given up on her. But I decided to, because of Chance, to go follow her. And we started walking around the park, and she couldn't find her sister. I was trying to cheer her up. And then we get to town square, and I see across the way, Tala is walking with the other twin the other direction towards us. And so the two sisters meet in the middle, and they can see each other. They embraced, and that was their unfinished business, and they were able to pass on.
That's
That's amazing.
Very cool.
That was
And in fact, after all of the things that have happened, finale night, that was one of my favorite moments.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Do we want to jump into other stories that people had during lore with specific characters that they'd like to share?
I had a fun, and it was the soft open, so it wasn't canon or anything, because the park wasn't very full, and I was there with my wife, and I was Maya, and we were interacting with Nicodemus, and that was actually my only interaction with Nicodemus, because during normal open hours, he was so busy. It was so busy. It was so much fun to see the park that full. But on the same token, like, I want to talk to these people, but I know that that we need to share everybody with the new people, and so that they can come to love the park as we do. Mm-hmm. But I played it off that he gave me the willies. When we were talking to him, my wife was talking to him, and I would just dance around opposite of him. And he saw that. He kept on. It was so much fun. And my wife's like, don't be scared. I'm like, he's terrifying. No, I'm not. It was so much fun just to have that little interaction with him.
That's fun. It was great to bring my son. My 9-year-old son was a little bit intimidated by Nicodemus, because the makeup team did a great job. He looked really scary. He had black contacts, and horns everywhere. And I was able to help my son work through that fear of this character and be like, he only has power over you if you're afraid of him. And so having him build up that courage to not shrink away from Nicodemus was really empowering for him. And it was really neat later for him to tackle other things that were scary in the real world and be like, I can do this because I'm not scared of Nicodemus, So love that. Audrey, do you have any experiences in particular with a character you'd like to share?
There was when Aiden, the dragon trainer, was still here before he left. He and Anshar were walking down the path, and Anshar is another dragon trainer that came in with the pirates during Pyra. But Nicodemus found them and started circling them and doing his whole shark thing, and it was a little terrifying. Anshar definitely she shrunk way back. She was like, get away from me. But Aiden just stood there with his stoic face, like, who are you and why are you in my way? But Nicodemus was fascinated with Aiden and even called him his new obsession, which makes me glad that Aiden left. But it was just interesting to see Aiden's stoicness and face Nicodemus, and it's kind of these two immovable walls hit each other. So that was kind of fun.
Mm-hmm. Talking about Nicodemus, it reminded me how at the beginning of the season when the Ataman came into town, they were very much portrayed as villains. But as the weeks went on, I felt like they weren't the villains. When I talked to Zen Tipi, who was another Ataman, they were saying that the demons would eat souls ethically, which was a really fascinating concept. They wouldn't just go murder someone. Instead, they would go to penitentiaries and ask for which inmates were slated for death row, and those are the ones they would eat. Or people who were very sick and dying, they would eat those. And as you would talk to Zen Tipi more and more, the perspective changed a lot on how these weren't necessarily evil characters. I thought that was really fascinating.
Speaking of villains, I found it hard dealing with Titus.
So.
Well, I never really got to know him, but from the pirates' point of view, he was always like, we blame him for killing Anders. but
Sure.
at the same time, he's now a Blackheart. So how do we deal with that? And Robin, I think you had a lot more interaction with him than I did.
Yeah, Titus was what I kind of latched onto for the whole season. So I knew more about his storyline than the big picture for most of the town. But Titus was really fun to get to know because he had been brought back into town by Drake. He'd been hiding outside of the outskirts of town, and Drake hunted him down or tracked him down and brought him back. And he was, confined to the Blackheart's hovel, like a prison kind of, for a lot of the season. And it was really interesting getting to know him and his story. He has a very tragic backstory and just a life full of, incredible abuse and torture, and never really knowing friendship and kindness except from this one person that he was in love with. And she ended up being murdered because of him. And so then that guilt that he would carry around, he wouldn't let himself feel friendly with anybody. So it was a beautiful experience to talk to him and just convince him that there's beauty that can be enjoyed in life no matter your past, and that your past does not always need to define you, that each day is a new day and you are a new person. Essentially, each day the choices you make affect who you are. And we did a lot of talking with them of like, what kind of a person do you want to be? And then you can make that happen, So for me, I loved his character arc, seeing him want to be a kind person and seeing him allow himself to be vulnerable to those who cared for him. And oh my gosh, I just loved it. I looked forward to talking to Titus anytime I visited. And if it was a night that Titus wasn't in town, it was really sad. And as there were vampires in town, Titus had experience with vampires. He expressed that he was quite concerned about the town for the vampires' plans. And so it was really fun smuggling things into him. He asked for some wooden stakes and holy water. So I went home with my boys and we made wooden stakes and little vials of holy water and put them in a leather holster my husband made. And we brought that into him. And it was so fun because my character's a smuggler anyway. So getting things into the park is great fun. I like that challenge. So as a disclaimer, though, you're not allowed to bring pointy things in the park. And when I had this package, it was in a box, so the points couldn't be bumped and hurt anyone. And I was very particular about this package is only for Titus. And he wasn't there at first, so I gave it only to Chance, who's the creative director, for those who don't know. So I knew he could be trusted with that package. However, I do get the security team focuses on my bags a lot more now. And so there definitely is a consequence, but it was really fun bringing that in and then seeing Titus wear that all season as part of his costume. It was just super awesome. Loved it.
That's cool. You have to keep the security team on their toes.
Yeah, it's like a game. I don't ever bring in things that are really a problem. That one was borderline.
Yeah. They're great to play along though. Like when we did our poison smuggling, and Kyler in security, he was popping out of bushes everywhere, yes, stealing poison from us. Anyway, that was
to explain. It wasn't really poison for those who do not know the story. We should clarify that Pitt was smuggling in little vials of water that were labeled poison as part of a game for the Pirates Guild. But yeah, don't try that. I don't recommend it. It can get you thrown out of the park,
especially with COVID now.
Yeah,
can't even trade. So
it's important to
clarify with security before you do something risky like that.
Speaking of hijinks, I'd like to just mention Brillan the Scourge. I had a good time doing that, and that's just another way that you can interact with characters in the park. And this one was COVID friendly. So for those of you who don't know, a year ago I tried to get into the Knights Guild, pretty much as a joke, because being a pirate, and especially the kind of pirate I am, it goes against everything that I stand for to be an honorable person. And so Sir Kalari, right off the get-go, denied me access to the Knights. And back then I was able to get into the Knights but in secret by dressing up as a normal world walker with a baseball cap and a baby. And that was hilarious. Her reactions are always just over the top, and I love them. So this year, this season, I decided to step up my game, and so I actually came in disguised as Brillan the Scourge. He was kind of a barbarian character, and for 3 weeks, I leveled up in the Knights. And most people didn't recognize me at first, at least. Audrey, you did, and Robin, you did. I think you were the two that recognized me, and I probably because of my laugh. I don't know. But I thought for sure that Bryn, out of character knew it was me, but afterwards she said it. She had no idea. So it was completely a shock on the night of me getting to level 4 where she knighted me, and I took my mask off. I guess I had a wig that went over my tattoo, and obviously I was wearing a mask for COVID. I took them both off and revealed myself, and it was great. There's a video if you want to see it.
Yeah, you should put the address for that video in the bottom
The
of
link
her.
is here.
And I thought she did a fabulous job not breaking out of character.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of Sir Kaliri, she
You wanna
had
tell us
some fun things going on last few weeks of lore. Audrey, I believe you were there for most of that. I missed a bunch of it.
It's funny. That's kind of what solidified me joining the Knights, was the fact that I kept spending all my time there. So what happened is that Kaliri just kind of disappeared one night, and we were all like, where is she? She comes in later when it's dark, kind of limping. I wasn't there for her initial entrance into the World Walker area, so I'm not sure how that went, but I just kind of saw her going over to the stairs, and I remember one of the other Evermore Knights asked her, like, are you okay? And she's like, no, I'm fine. And I was like, that's a lie right there. So go to find out that she had been in the catacombs for some reason that, she didn't know. She was on patrol, didn't have an explanation, but she was in the catacombs and had been attacked by a vampire. So she had bite marks on her neck. I can't remember if at this point if her eyes were red. I believe they were, but she was kind of shaking and terrified that she literally, the process that a human is turned into a vampire is they have all their blood drained out of them, and then they have vampiric blood put into them by the vampire that is biting them. And so for her, this is a complete change. Like, it's not just I got bit by a mosquito, maybe I might get infected. She's physically changed throughout the weeks to come, because you did mention that vampires have to feed at least once a month. So she kept getting hungrier and hungrier and weaker because she was fighting it. Normally, blight veins, humans turned vampires, normally they have to feed within a few days that they are turned, but she didn't. She was fighting it, and so she kept getting weaker. There would be periods of time when she would actually lose control. Luckily, we had magic users such as Sir Taylor as well as Miranda, who were liaisons to the Knights, and they could actually use magic to kind of calm her down, give her clarity of mind. There was a point when we were unfortunate enough to have to break bad news to her about something a lead that we had, and she actually lost it and charged one of the World Walkers.
Wow.
And luckily enough, I believe it was Miranda who was there, was able to stop her. But just as time went on, and
out of character, that's kind of cool that Miranda could play that part in the story.
Yeah, and it also, we were looking for anything possible that would be able to either turn her back or satiate her hunger. And this is where we learned that with the vampires specifically, they have to eat a sapient being. So, like, it could be an elf, it could be a human, but it has to be sapient, not sentient, sapient. And that it has to die. And so we tried everything we could think of to bypass that. And talking with Seneca, who was the mad scientist, don't call him that to his face, of the circus, they've been trying to find something to help out with that for, thousands of years. So they didn't have an answer. He was able to, however, create a potion. I can't remember what he put in it. I believe it had some cobalt as well. But that it would satiate her hunger for a little bit of time. But we had to be very careful when we gave that to her, because once she drank it, it's a one and done. Like, she can't drink anymore. And also, I believe with the cobalt in it would make it so that her magical ability to heal faster would be stopped.
Because she's Mythosian, right?
Mhm.
Augmentation.
Yes. And we did have her drink that the night that she charged the World Walker. We felt that it was time to have her drink that. And it did give her a little bit more strength. It gave her a little bit more clarity. She was able to keep control for a little bit longer. It definitely was a fight to kind of keep her spirits up.
And on top of this, she was being mind controlled by the vampire that bit her, correct?
Yes. So do we want to go into that right now
Yeah.
about that whole story?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll need a little bit of a history lesson here. Evermore, thousands and thousands of years ago, there are the vampires, the Zavros, that came in from Dayloth. They kind of got trapped here because the portal closed. And so them, as well as the people from Dayloth, the Daylothians, who were part of the circus, came through and the portal closed. So they didn't have a way home. That's how they kind of came to be here. The Zavros kind of took up residence the Evermore area, specifically the catacombs of the mausoleum. And what happened is, I'm not 100% sure why, but they started fighting over a magical artifact called the Chalice of the Dawn with the Knights of Earth. So they had this huge fight. There were 3 different groups of humans, pureborn.
Shield.
Yeah,
thought
so
they
there
were
were
all
3 groups.
one
One were kind of the.
I thought they were all one, the pureborn reclaimers, and then after all of this, they split into the 3.
So no, actually, it's the other way around. They were 3 groups. They were all together, but they were 3 groups. Like there was the shields, there were the ones who gather information, and the ones who were kind of in command of everything.
One was like Shadow something, right?
Or Shadeworthy. It's Shadeworthy.
Yeah. Shadeworthy.
Yes. So specifically, there was a leader, and there were 2 members, Tristan Pureborn, and help me out with his sister, Gwyneth. Gwyneth Pureborn.
Yeah, I think so.
Shadeworthy.
Yeah, she was a pureborn at the beginning.
I believe she was. But they pretty much, the humans had pushed down into the catacombs. So they had kind of, I believe, the top few levels in control for the humans. And the vampires were like, this isn't okay. So they actually did a major battle. The vampires were able to kind of overwhelm the humans. And in the last few minutes of that battle, Gwyneth, throughout this whole battle, had always felt that it was wrong, that she didn't really want to be fighting like they were. And so she refused to fight at one point. And Tristan was very angry, charged at her, tried to fight her, tried to kill her, even though they were siblings. And she stabbed him with her weapon, saw him collapse and kind of crawl back into the caves, into the catacombs. And so for her, she thought he was dead. Now,
in retrospect, he was kind of crazy because of his sword, correct?
Yes. So Tristan was gifted a sword from his father, I believe. Restgiver. It's a claymore, so it is this massive sword. During a battle, it got caught in the wall, and out of anger, because it's really small areas, giant claymore didn't really mix well. He actually snapped it in half, so it was only half of the sword. But this claymore had been passed down through generations and generations from fighters, and so it actually kind of has this curse on it. We don't know a lot about it, but we do know that it does kind of drive someone insane. And for Tristan, he was literally going crazy. Now, when he crawled back into the catacombs and was presumed dead, what actually happened is one of the other vampires who were there, that they just kind of won this war with the humans, decided to bite him as a punishment for what he had done. So he actually became a Blightbane. Gwyneth kind of retired, kind of wrote about the Zavros. She worked with the Grey family specifically, and they created the Reclaimers, so the magical group in Evermore that kind of want to protect the town and collect magical artifacts. With Tristan, what happened with Kalyri is that she was lured somehow into the catacombs when she was on patrol. Tristan actually believed that she was Gwyneth. Kalyri is a female knight. Just the way she carries herself, he thought she was Gwyneth. So he actually lured her into the catacombs and bit her, turned her into a Blightbane, because he wanted her to find his sword. Now, what happened with his sword, rest giver is a little bit weird. So the sword was dropped when he started crawling into the caves, and we don't know what happened to it. Gwinnett just left it there, and so we honestly don't know what happened to it. And it turns out that we found out the last few nights, one of the Zavros came and had a meeting with us, with Kalari, and told us that it had been transformed into an object, that it was still in Evermore, but that it had been transformed and we wouldn't be able to really identify it. And it's been so long that they don't remember either what it was.
Because it's been 1,000 years.
Yeah, it's been a long time. And so pretty much our goal, well, with Tristan, is that because of the curse on the sword, he has this obsession with it, that he has to have it, that is the most important thing in his life.
He's still crazy because of it.
Yes, the craziness didn't wear off over thousands of years of him being crazy without the sword. He probably got worse, just craving it so much. And so when he bit Gwinnett, his whole thing was he wanted her to find his rest giver, kind of a thing. And so that was literally Kalari's orders, was to find the sword. And he would control her so that she wouldn't be able to do certain things. So for example, we needed to go to the coven to figure out a spell that could freeze her in place if needed to be. And she couldn't go into the coven. Like, he physically would not let her go into the coven. We did try different things of trying to break the mind control over her, because what happens, the reason they're controlled is because the Blight Vein has the blood of the vampire who turned them inside their body. So it makes that connection. And we tried a lot of things. We tried, I think tin is the correct metal to block out that type of magic. And when Kalari would find the tin, she would get rid of it. It would disappear, which actually is really important, because there was a pendant, a charm, a small metal something that they tried to tie onto like Kalari so that she could break that. And, of course, later it was gone, and we're all like, oh, she just got rid of it. But that actually came into play later on when the final battle happened.
I just want to say, all of the things that you've said so far, it's cool how we found it all out. It was a year and a half ago, we found these texts in the catacombs in Vampiric.
The shadow text.
And they had to be translated.
Mm-hmm.
And we heard of these stories long before they ever came into play.
That was planted long before. I love how they do that, planting these things that refer back to previous seasons.
The shadow text was written in Vampiric. So the Knights and the Rangers actually had to work together for once. We actually had to decode papers and letters that were written to us. Those letters we were able to decode at least halfway. It was a really, really hard code that it would take like a minute per letter, kind of a thing. So we were able to kind of get like the first bits of them. I believe there were 3 letters. And then we took them to the coven to see if they could divine what the rest of the letters said. And they were able to, which was actually told us what the sword was. Lady Grey actually kind of came out and told us that she always knew what it was, which is a little annoying. We were all kind of mad at her for that, because she just wouldn't tell us, kind of led us on this wild goose chase. But it turns out that the sword had been transformed into, do you remember what type of weapon it is?
It was a bident.
A bident, yes. So the sharper end, call it what you will, had been kind of, the Grey family had taken that part of the weapon, because it had been split in half when Tristan and Gwinnett were fighting. He actually cut her weapon in half, and they took the spearhead kind of part and actually transformed the sword into that. So we had the pieces. So the coven did a ritual they were able to turn it back into this massive half a claymore. And with that, we were like, well, Tristan's gonna find out, so it's time to set a trap for him. And I mean, it went okay. What happened is we got ready, kind of made preparations. Kalari addressed all of her knights and made sure that we knew, like, if Kalari goes crazy, our orders are to kill her, which is a little scary.
Side note here, as Brillan the Scourge, I thought it was so cool that the knights were like this secret, club of just trust and honor, and you guys were just a tight group. And I kind of envied that. That was really neat. And especially during this time where Sir Kalari is going through so much, she really needed you guys.
And that's what brought us together, honestly.
Yeah, that's neat.
Yeah. So we all got ready. We went to the stairs of St. Michael, and eventually we were able to call down Tristan. He came down the steps and was kind of like snarling, kind of creepy, and obviously insane. Clary gave him the sword, and then he was kind of like I'll finish this kind of thing. And so they started sword fighting. Now the World Walkers, the spell that we had been given that could freeze Clary, we could also use to freeze Tristan. However, there was that pendant that we had tried to sneak onto Clary. Tristan had made her give it to him.
Oh, okay.
So he had magical protection from us, where we could say the spell and it wouldn't affect him.
I didn't know that.
And so they were fighting. Clary started losing, and he bit her neck. He pretty much ripped out her throat as kind of this final, like, so this is all your fault, Gwyneth, now you die kind of a thing. For a while there, we thought that all hope was lost. We're like, oh, okay, well, Clary's dead now. But she was able to get back up and continue fighting somehow. And eventually, he had her in kind of like a hold with his sword to her neck, and she was able to reach back and yank the pendant from his neck. And that's when we were able to do the spell to freeze him. And that's when Clary was able to, well, impale him, kill him kind of a thing. But she was limping away, and Aran had to pretty much carry her away, dragging.
I thought she was done for at that point.
Because she'd lost a lot of blood, even though like she was a vampire, but still she, you know, was weak from not eating for a month. She didn't have anyone to feed on. So she kind of went into a coma is what happened. They brought her to Drakenhaven and told us World Walkers, it's kind of up to her will now to see if she's strong enough to pull through.
Thank you for joining us. If you want to leave feedback or suggestions, we'd be glad to receive it. Our email is evercastweekly@gmail.com. And if you see us in park, come up and introduce yourselves. We love meeting new people and experiencing Evermore together. Thank you.
How long are we going to be doing this?
It's lore recap.
Oh.
Just take care of-
Hush it, puppies. One second.
Well, thanks for joining us. Hopefully I don't know what to say. What should I say?
No hard feelings. That shadow text is only my favorite thing in the world, but that's okay.
Wait, you said he was almost level 7 archer. He's a ranger.
Did I say Archer? Okay, I'll do it again. Where did Sly go? Well, don't worry. I'm showing Renee's messy house this time.
Oh, if you do.
Someday I'm going to cry in park.
Is this a challenge bit?
It should be.
I think it sounds like a challenge.
Part of this.
Yeah.
Is what we're saying right now going to be in the podcast?
No, unless it's funny.
Okay, so
Don't y'all jump in at once.
Should we be promoting smuggling things in?
Yes. 1, 2, 3.
Lots of people go bye-bye, sad day.
I don't know.
All right.
Just